The Democrats are at an all-time low, in their polling. The Wall Street Journal published a few weeks ago a poll finding that it was at a 35-year low, basically since their polling record, they started tracking it. But it's not because of just the party got too woke. And it's not just because of how uncharismatic Kamala and Biden were, or how badly they campaigned or anything like this. We have to understand that the fate that the Democratic Party has suffered is part of a global phenomenon that's throughout the West. All of these OECD countries where you have this picture of decline for the status quo, for the ruling institutions, for all the parties that governed in a very stable way. Think about how many of these countries had two-party systems. I started just looking just off the top of my head from a few of the UK, it was Tories and Labour for a long time. Your turn, then my turn, then your turn, kick them out, then the others come in. In Spain, it was the PSOE and the PP on the right. In Germany, the SPD and the CDU. In France, it was the Republicans and the Socialist Party. All of these, one after another, they all had a very stable arrangement, and they all entered into crisis roughly around the same time. When Trump and Sanders emerged on the scene in 2016, roughly that was the period where you had a disruption of all these two-party stable arrangements everywhere. I would say in the US, you had the same thing. It just didn't lead to the creation at this point of a new party, except if you want to, in a sense, the Republican Party pre-Trump and the Republican Party, it did kind of lead to the creation of a new party within the form of the old, and the Democrats are in a total existential crisis of their own. So you've had this disruption everywhere. The common feature of all of these countries is that, there's this generalized hatred towards all the parties that ruled for a long time, and the only force that's capitalizing it is on the right. It's the right-wing populists. There was an article on Marxist.com recently about Japan having its own version of this, the Sanseito is a right-wing populist party. Their slogan is, there's no party worth voting for, so we're going to build one from scratch. Not a bad slogan. And they had just 2.8 thousand members in 2020. Now they just got 9 million votes in the upper house in Japan. One of their other slogans is Japan First. They're capitalizing on discontent, on anger against immigrants in Japan. And their base is basically youth and young men. I mean, this is a very similar situation all throughout, and this is one of the OECD countries. This means that the establishment is on the defensive all throughout the West. And it's just like with the Democrats, and Trump calls them the deep state, but the average human material that filled the federal bureaucracy was on this side, was born of this kind of outlook. You can call them the neocons. When Trump came around, they looked at him like a threatening foreign object that was out of his element, that didn't belong, and they tried everything to do to paralyze him and to stop him. I mean, this Russiagate thing, if anyone listens to The Daily, there's some episodes of The Daily of the New York Times podcast that are just insufferable, but this Russiagate one, they were treating it like Trump is just coming up with this baseless hoax that the Russian collusion in the 2016 election wasn't real. And now Trump's using this, he's weaponizing this to go against Obama officials. It was not real. What did Russia do in 2016? Having chatbots, as JD Vance said at the Munich Security Conference, having some chatbots and social media posts, if that's what brings down your election, what does that tell you about the strength of your democracy? That's what Russia did in 2016, like chatbots and comments on social media. Is that what made the Democrats so unpopular? Is that what tanked Hillary Clinton's chances in 2016? And yet, the CIA, FBI officials all came together and said, yes, we found very concerning evidence that Russia has helped Donald Trump to win this election. I mean, this whole thing was a manufactured hoax. So when you say that there's a civil war in the federal government, keep in mind who started this civil war. It was the establishment that took the first shots. And they're trying to do this all throughout Europe as well. I mean, sometimes they're just outright overturning elections, as in the case of Romania. In France, they managed to do to Le Pen what they hoped they were going to be able to do with the Trump impeachments. They get her on a technicality, and now she's barred from running. But none of these moves have done anything to stabilize, to bring back stability for them. None of them have helped improve the appeal of the status quo of all these hated parties. And so in each of these countries, in Germany, the AfD is the most popular party now. The Rally in France is still leading the polls. Farage, Reform UK, is still leading. In each of these parties, this is the one force that is tapping systematically into that discontent. I would say also that the troubles facing the European ruling class have really only started. I mean, you're seeing like a sense of panic in the European ruling class in particular, but the debt level of the OECD countries has skyrocketed. The average debt to GDP is around 111%. Interest payments in France are the single biggest expense in the French budget. Bayrou, I hope comrades are watching what's happening in France. Bayrou, the president, is about to fall, is scheduled to fall on Monday. And the language coming out of the French labor movement is incredibly militant. I mean, they're basically quoting Lenin, saying the ruling class can't rule like before, and the working class can't tolerate their conditions like they did before. And this is an era of class war. Let's occupy the factories. This is not us saying this. This is the Unité CGT. This is like the left wing but this is a massive force. But these are the conditions, this is the mood among the French working class. French ministers have said openly, 2 different French finance ministers have said that France is going to need an IMF bailout. You have high-profile UK economists saying the same thing about Britain, about the British debt. The IMF has $1 trillion in lending capacity. Just to put it into perspective, British debt is 3.8 trillion, French debt is 3.1 trillion. When they bailed out Greece 10 years ago, that was $37 billion. I mean, we're talking about a level of insolvency that is totally different. To have Western European countries, OECD countries, moving into a Sri Lanka-style predicament where they cannot pay their bills, but they're also not going to be able to continue governing and operating, because to move forward, I mean, they cannot make a right step. The Economist published an article last week, Fear the Deficit Populism Doom Loop. This is how they're kind of trying to get sympathy from the reader. Listen, you're a finance minister. Put yourself... I had to take a government class in high school, and they gave us like pretty much this exact scenario. You're a finance minister after a decade of meager economic growth, shocks from a financial crisis, a pandemic, and sky-high energy prices. Public debt is worth more than your country's GDP. Interest rates are at their highest in years, and merely servicing outstanding debt is taking up an ever greater share of tax revenue. Inflation is stubborn. America is satisfying much of the world's appetite for government bonds, meaning your debt must pay more to attract investors. You lie awake, worrying about how to make the numbers add up. Your fellow ministers, meanwhile, fret for their careers. Populist parties are on the rampage. The economic context calls for fiscal consolidation. The political one warns against austerity. What do you do? Give me a 50-word answer. But the article ends by pointing out that the populists are the ones, they're talking about the deficit populism doom loop. They're saying, we found this curious correlation between an increase in austerity and the rising appeal of populism. But that doesn't mean that the populists are going to have it easy either. They say the populist bind is a tight one. This is how the article ends. Pity the finance minister hoping to keep debt burdens under control and the hard right at bay. At least during his sleepless nights, he can console himself that when he is booted from office, his populist successor will face many of the same constraints. See how they like it. And that is true. I mean, once you have this force in the wings that can benefit, and they're skillfully doing everything they can to use this. All of this discontent and all this incompetent bungling from the establishment parties, everything the establishment does to try and hold them off is only helping them. But once you have these forces start to get into the control room in country after country, they're going to completely expose themselves because they have no solutions for any of this.